All right, welcome everybody. Hello to everybody who's watching the recording or listening live. Let me start by introducing Jonathan. Jonathan is our beloved founder of the Purpose Guides Institute. Jonathan's soul has this unique and beautiful gift of midwifing people back into wholeness by guiding them to find that place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet, as Frederick Buechner says. And he does that by guiding people to find and embody their soul's deepest calling. And he also does that by training purpose guides to support others in doing that. So at PGI, we also train people to become certified purpose guides. For over 25 years, Jonathan has been a psychotherapist, meditation teacher, and a purpose guide. He's also founded an environmental activist organization called Green Sangha. He recently retired as the adjunct professor of JFK University, and he's also contributing author for the anthology Purpose Rising, along with other authors like Bill Plotkin, Erwin Laszlo, and Ken Wilber. He's also had the incredible honor of teaching alongside eco-activist Joanna Macy, human potential pioneer George Leonard, and eco-psychologist Bill Plotkin, many of whom might be familiar to many of you. So welcome, Jonathan, and welcome, Charles. Maybe, Jonathan, you would like to introduce our wonderful guest tonight?
Not maybe, definitely. Thank you for that lovely introduction. I really appreciate everything you do, you and the whole crew behind the scenes. So it's my honor to introduce Charles Eisenstein, who probably needs no introduction, but you're going to get one anyway. He is a public speaker and author. His work covers a wide range of topics, including the history of human civilization, economics, spirituality, and the ecology movement. According to Charles, global culture is immersed in a destructive story of separation. And one of the main goals of his work is to present an alternative, the story of interbeing. Charles is an original, caring, and influential thinker who shares an antidote to dehumanizing patterns of human culture amidst our converging crises, a vision of sacralization that restores the sacredness of all beings and the natural world. He transmits a profound clarity, a disarming open-mindedness, and deep care for the human future and that of the more than human realm. Charles is the author of several books, some of which you will have read, or I think you might want to check out, including The Ascent of Humanity, The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible, Sacred Economics, and pertinent to why I invited Charles to come to this council, Climate, A New Story. I admire his ability to take disparate topics and sense where some unexplored aspect may reside. He comes up with novel and vital takes on myriad subjects, including climate change. So warm welcome. Hello, Charles.
Hi, Jonathan. Thank you for such a generous introduction. Happy to be here.
Good to have you here. So in a moment, I'm going to sort of start a very little brief interview and ask you some questions. But before I do that, is there any sort of, by way of just setting the stage, anything you want to sort of say or lead a minute of meditation, and I can go right into the interview if you'd like, but I just want to see if anything spontaneously arises that you'd like to share to kick us off.
Yeah, maybe I'll just note that every single person here on this call is here because they care deeply about life on Earth. And that already, for me, is fuel for optimism. Like, it's showing us a part of human nature that isn't always so obvious when we look at the state of the environment on this planet. So let's notice this part too.
Amen. Yeah. So I'm going to just invite us all to close our eyes for a moment and follow the perfume of what Charles just shared. Is take a moment to sink into, if you're not already there, your deep caring and love of life, all life. It's from this place that we can meet all across the globe via Zoom. We may be different in many ways. And perhaps it would be helpful, since we're going to concentrate on the ecological crisis, climate change, just to acknowledge, so that we can give all our attention to climate and so forth, that this council could have been war as spiritual practice, racism as spiritual practice, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, inequality as spiritual practice. It's all related, of course. And our love isn't exclusive to the so-called topic of ecological restoration. But that is where we're going to take our deep dive together. So I'm going to start with the questions. And Charles, you can just go on for 10 minutes if you like, or pause, and then I'll have, many more questions for you. So here's number one. So, as you know, traditional environmentalism often claims that climate change is the number one issue. From the International Panel for Climate Change to those familiar hockey stick graphs, especially around carbon and methane, it would seem that there is much evidence to support the climate change's preeminent narrative. In your book, Climate, A New Story, you seem to see things a bit differently. So my question is, in your view, what is actually at the heart of the ecological crisis, and where does climate change fit in with that?
Yeah, okay. Obviously, well, it's obvious to me, and probably most people here, the climate is spinning out of control into a greater and greater state of derangement. My view of why that's happening differs a little bit from at least some of the voices in the climate movement, because really where I'm coming from is to see Earth as a living being. And when the organs and tissues of a living being are degraded, then it loses its ability to maintain homeostasis and loses its ability to deal with challenges such as rising levels of greenhouse gases. But it could be any other challenge too that life on Earth would be ill prepared to meet if its forests and rivers and oceans and wetlands and soils have all been depleted of life. And I like to emphasize this dimension of the climate crisis for a couple of reasons. One is just like scientifically, it makes more and more sense as we understand the role of, for example, forests in anchoring the water cycle and even bringing rain into the continental interiors. So you can look at it from that perspective. But I also go to the part of what motivates me as an environmentalist to begin with. For me, it never was, and maybe I'm kind of dating myself here as old, but back in the day, it was not about saving humanity or saving civilization or avoiding extinction. It was about the beauty and the wonder and the sacredness of these living beings that we were destroying. And I think that for me, that is still the motivation, which means that if all of a sudden temperatures started to drop and global warming, faded from urgency, I would still actually oppose almost everything that climate activists oppose. Fracking and pipelines and oil exploration and strip mining and all of these practices for different reasons. So I don't know, I feel like this time period is too short for me to really lay it out in detail, but it comes down to what you spoke to in the meditation, that we care about life because actually what a human being is one of the organs of Gaia. Our purpose here is the same as the purpose of all life on Earth. Once we mature into that purpose, it is the same as all life on Earth, which is to contribute to life on Earth. Life maintains the conditions for life. I was just reading an article, I hope it's okay for me to go on a little bit, on whales. And it was it was in the Atlantic, actually. Something like the title was something like the whales, the loss of the whales left a huge hole in the ocean. And it describes really how the whales were an organ of the ocean. When they almost exterminated, in the 20th century, whales were almost exterminated. The biomass of the whales exterminated in the 20th century exceeds the total of all other mammals on Earth right now. That's how much biomass was destroyed. When that happened, and most of these whales, they ate krill, these little crustaceans. So you'd think that it was good news for the krill if the whales were exterminated, right? No. Krill populations plummeted by 80 or 90% because the whales were no longer bringing nutrients from the depths to the surface and pooping them, which create food for the plankton and the algae, which anchor the entire food chain. And so basically what happened is the ocean ecosystem collapsed, abetted, of course, not only by whaling, but by industrial fishing and so on and so forth. So that is an example of how whales were doing their job. Now it's our turn to do our job. Now, of course, when I say our, I'm talking about civilization, because many, many people who have lived on Earth and are still here on Earth understood that. And that was built into their culture. That, yeah, we are one of a family, and we contribute to the family. Modern civilization has not yet matured into that realization. We still kind of think that our purpose here is to dominate, to get into, to control everything and make the world better and better for us. But we're learning that we can't actually do that. Climate change is a message that says what we do to the world, we do to ourselves. But I would even take it further, like the whales, the hole in the ocean that they left, it also left a hole in ourselves. Even if we could survive on a dying planet, something in us begins dying as well. When you look outside and you don't see life, and you don't hear an owl, and you go to the ocean, I was there with my son today, and there's a few seagulls, we didn't see any whales. If this was 500 years ago, the landscape would have been blanketed in waterfowl. We would have seen possibly thousands of whale spouts. Sometimes they would fill the air with mist. And today we don't even know what we've lost, this richness of connection and belonging. So to me, that is a spiritual idea. As our other Tobias, I think it was, mentioned, what is spirituality anyway? It's the things that we can't quantify, that we can't measure, but we know that they are real. And to discover them and to live by them requires different forms of engagement and cognition than measuring, analyzing, cataloging, and so forth. You're muted, Jonathan.
I said, beautiful that you're pointing to alternate organs of perception that are closed for many people, and that to open them is part of that maturing process where we can become more more embodied as the earth itself. I want to come back to that spiritual piece because it's so key to this, but I want to ask one sort of sciencey question, and to bring us sort of into the council. So sort of let your psyche think if there's a kind of an induction you want to offer. Otherwise I'll do it. But my question is this, what is your take or your explanation for why seemingly legions of climate scientists will promote global warming as the #1 issue of concern? Do you see it as because, well, they're climate scientists and so they'll see everything through a climate lens? Would it be different message from our scientists were we hearing from a panel of, let's say, geologists, botanists, and forest conservationists? Because as I read the International Panel on Climate Change by climate scientists, they seem to be sounding a very large, alarm. There are books like Overshoot, if you're familiar with that one. And they're really going, yeah, tipping points have been passed and we're going to pass some more. So I'm wondering where you sit with that body of data.
I used to be much more alarmed in those terms than I am now. In the 90s, I've been following this issue for pretty much my whole life. And I was quite convinced that, we were going to have an ice-free Arctic by the year 2007, I think it was, and then the year 2010, and then 2013. I was thoroughly convinced that we were facing runaway global warming, and we had a window of, 5 to 12 years to stop it. Otherwise, it was going to be too late. And that window kept getting, it's still 5 to 12 years. And I guess I came to be skeptical of that particular kind of alarmism, while at the same time becoming more and more alarmed about what I was seeing environmentally all over the world that might be caused by warming temperatures and might not. Like, what if you, and again, this is like much too big a conversation to have in this format. And my book was disturbing to mainstream climate people, activists, and was also disturbing to the skeptics who we call climate deniers, because I do think that there is a urgent crisis right now, a crisis of the depletion of life. And it's so simple and satisfying to reduce that crisis to one thing, the one thing that we can measure and control by adopting even more technology. Whereas when you understand it as a systems problem that can't be reduced to one thing, then it doesn't lend itself as easily to big centralized solutions and to industrial solutions and to geoengineering and to the continuation of the same mindset that has governed us for so long. And I could give all kinds of examples. It's because I care that I'm skeptical, or have become skeptical, of this rather reductionistic attribution of the cause of everything from, insect die-off to soil erosion to like, I mean, all of these things. Oh, it's climate change, like forest fires. You miss so much, like the flooding in Europe, for example. Well, okay, yeah, you can say, well, it's caused by, changing weather patterns caused by global warming, or you can also look at what about the destruction of wetlands all across Europe. 90% of them have been destroyed. That used to be sponges that absorbed excess rainfall. That doesn't exist anymore. So let's look at that and then ask, who benefits, or how do I even benefit from ignoring those things? Like, what's being left out? That's always my question when you talk about science, when you talk about numbers. What's left out of the numbers? Often what's left out are the people and places that are always left out by the numbers, by the financial numbers, by the scientific numbers. And we got to bring everybody back in and start seeing what is invisible through our customary lens. So what I'm saying pertains whether or not the climate scientists are right. They very well may be. They very well may be. I'm not actually like invested in overturning that narrative. It's just not where I put my focus. And where I'm putting my focus pertains whether we have cooling or warming in the next 10 years. What the most important thing to do is the same. It is to protect any undisturbed ecosystems that still exist, and it is to regenerate the ones that have been damaged. And that makes sense also even from a carbon perspective, because these are the carbon sinks, the soil is the carbon sink, the forest, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't want to get into that conversation because it's not necessary. It's a distraction. And it has served to divide, like a lot of traditional people who were traditionally environmentalists, they were like ranchers and hunters and people like that. And they've been like kind of excluded from the, environmental community. So anyway, could talk a lot more about that.
Yeah. With only 100 follow-up questions. It is one of your soul core powers, in my estimation, to ask the question, what's being left out? And then you have those dark adjusted eyes that see those different elements. So I don't hear you saying, no, I've studied and come to the conclusion that the International Panel on Climate Change is wrong, just that it may or may be correct, but there are other elements and they hardly get any of the ink, and you're pushing those forward, saying, wait, it's a whole systemic thing. There's the forests and the insects and the whales and the krill and, well, everything else in capitals.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to begin to segue us into our council. And so the council question is pretty simple. And Charles, you can reformulate it as you see fit, but it's something like this. As I feel into the ecological crisis before me, what is in my heart? As I sense and feel the ecological crisis, which I am in, which is moving through me, which I am a part of, what is in my heart? And in a moment, I'll show a slide with some council guidelines, but I just want to make space for Charles if there's any words of induction that you wish to add.
Yeah, I would offer to change the wording from ecological crisis to something a bit more visceral. Like, what is some aspect of it that really hits you? For me, it's the destruction of the Congo rainforest, the Amazon rainforest, the burnings, the plantations, the like or the pits of the mines that are destroying whole mountains. You know, like I have like these images. The beached whales with plastic bags in their guts, you know. So I'd like, yeah, I would just point to maybe ask people to tune into what is the image or what is the story that really like makes you feel it, you know, what's happening on Earth.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So we are going to share very soon that story, that image that hits us viscerally. A few people will have a chance to share, and Charles will mirror or, you know, offer a little something back, and then we're going to break out into groups. So this is a very truncated council set of council instructions. So to avoid discussions about who will go first, we're going to share an alphabetical order of your Zoom name. So just do it that way, starting at A. And then each person will get about 40 seconds. And my request is that you share your feelings as opposed to facts. There are so many important facts to share, but this is really what's in your heart. So I'm advising not to use it as an opportunity to educate your small group about something that's happening, but for you to be known and seen, to be located in your heart. To listen with compassion. Let each person have their experience. If someone's crying, maybe love thinks it would be good to go and console them, but allow them their anger, their anxiety, their depression, their hopelessness, whatever the feeling is, just give them the space to experience it. They'll be okay. Just speak when it's your turn alphabetically, no crosstalk, which means after someone shares, don't go, oh yeah, I agree with you, I think that's great, or oh no, I don't. Just take a pass on that. We're all going to have to be council guardians. So in the unlikely event somebody goes on and on and on, it's okay to simply, this is what you would do, is bow and just say thank you. If they go on for more than a minute, just very sweetly and warmly, no anger, just thank you, because we want to have everyone have that opportunity. Same thing if someone starts talking about politics and science. This is a heart council. So there's many important things that we can attend to. So in a moment, I'm going to ask a few people to raise their hands to share an image, a story, what is in your heart that tugs, that feels so alive for you as you contemplate either the total ecological crisis or something very specific. Okay, let me stop sharing this. All right, and you'll have to let your camera be on. Okay, great. So let's go Amanda, and then Ali, then Kay. So you can unmute.
Hi,
and
I'm in Australia on my...
Please just keep it to 40 seconds. We're going to do kind of a demonstration of the way it'll work when we're in groups. Thanks.
I'm in Australia on my dawn walk, and I wasn't expecting to speak, but what sits in my heart is the fear of suffering, of watching the animals suffer, because the bushfires that we had in 2019 was something that the landscape doesn't understand in the way that they were so fierce. And I saw the animals that couldn't outrun the flames that normally regenerate the bushland in Australia. In fact, it destroyed. And I had so much fear for the animals in the environment that can't adapt fast enough.
Thank you. And Charles, as each person goes, if you want to just meet them, you can also say pass and I'll do it. You're muted.
I was a little confused. I thought we were doing breakout groups, but no,
we're demonstrating with 3 people kind of the way, just sharing. And in this case, you're going to have the opportunity to, yeah. Sorry for the confusion.
Yeah. I guess what's coming to me is just this innate felt kinship that we have with all life, you know, and our like instant ability to empathize with the suffering of others. Like this is a precious inborn treasure.
Yeah, thank you. Ali and then Kay.
Hello, everyone. What's coming up for me is I'm currently back in North Carolina, but I've been living and working in the Ecuadorian Amazon rainforest for the last year or so. And I was so excited the first time I went to Yasuni. And I couldn't wait because it's always been my dream. And on the boat right there, I just saw just this black smoke and barges with oil and barges with crates of beer and plastic just floating through the river. And I haven't been the same. And then I came back home to visit my family, and the forest that used to be here is just leveled. You know, my parents' house used to be surrounded by woods, and now it's surrounded by concrete and houses that all look the same. And I'm working hard to do what I can, but I was so looking forward to seeing the real forest, the Amazon, and it's not there anymore. There's an oil extraction in every single indigenous community in Yasuni except for one. It's incomprehensible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your grief. I'm just going to let it speak for itself.
Kay, please share.
Thank you. I was just recently brought in touch very powerfully with my heartbrokenness by a little snippet on NPR recently there was a bird singing its mating call, and that was the male, and another bird with a very different sound with its mating call, and that was the woman. And the next mating call was the last bird of that species uttering its mating call and having no response because there was none left. It was the last bird of that species. It was so profoundly, horrifyingly heartbreaking. That's it.
Yeah, I feel that. And I just want to, I feel like, I don't know, I'm not so comfortable with the format of reflecting something back each time, because I feel like saying something smart or wise in between it actually detracts. Like, we know what's happening, we can feel it. And I would prefer to just give the space for more sharings.
Fair enough. Yeah, let's do one more. And I'm just going to ask Niharika if you'd put us into our breakout groups. It looks like we can have smaller breakout groups because we have a 600 as opposed to 1,000. So maybe 15 people each. And let's allow Julie Ann to share a little.
Thank you. What's in my heart is also a tremendous grief and the images of where I live, where I grew up, where I've just returned after my father's death to the industrial coast of New Jersey, and a landscape thoroughly covered in cement and highways, the sound of traffic that is 24 hours a day, margins of wetlands and trees here and there, but a land that is predominantly rushed through and past and over. And it's just incredibly hard to feel, it's a place of profound alienation for me.
Warmly received, Julie. Yeah, one of the things that I miss is a natural soundscape.
These treasures that are lost, you know, like they're among the things that we don't count or can't count. You know, since when does being able to hear the sound of birds instead of the sound of cars, like, where does that fit into the calculations? And for me, it's so important to take in the reality of what's been lost. That's what grief is, you know? Grief is actually the process of knowing that something is lost in your body. And if we don't do that, then we'll never really know how precious all of the beings are that have not yet been lost, but will be if we don't hold them that precious. So really, like, understand that your gift, your grief is a gift, and it's not to like drag other people into it, but it's like to say, hey, this too.
Amen. Okay. All right. Wildly.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for this amazing gathering. And topically, spiritual environmentalism is right on cue with where I am at in something I've been developing. My body, like Nicole, is reflecting back the traumas that we as a collective are projecting onto the planet. And the planet as a living being is showing her dysregulated nervous system back to us. And so we're going to feel this profoundly. And the more sensitive you are, the more your body's going to react. Plus we have the pollutions and toxins that are in the environment. Yeah, my grief is profound. I'm in the Pacific Northwest. I've been fighting for salmon, for the forest, for the whales all my life, because at an early age, I recognized our connectedness. And so it's just been, you know, one and the same. There's, you know, never been a dispute, but I've come to realize that so many are disconnected. What has saved me of late was I started to become dismembered. My whole body started to crash. And profoundly, and what I understand to be synchronistically, I was in a class taking shamanic practicing. it saved me. It saved me from the ravages of what was happening around me. I still have a stress disorder. I've been diagnosed with complex PTSD because of trauma in my life and because of the trauma externally. And at the same time, I started to reflect on how the environmental movements, like Charles has so eloquently conveyed to us, were not being effective. Why? Well, because they were being too mechanized in their approach to climate. They would adopt the indigenous style of spirituality to make up for their lack of expression within their own movements. We need to do better. And so the one thing that I'll quickly say is that I have decided to gather the entire Salmon Nation between Alaska to California in a shamanic ceremony every equinox. And so to have this land on my email thread is so synchronistic. It's simply profound. And it tells me that I'm on the right path. And so this will be one way that I can find a solution to gather hearts, to raise vibration, raise consciousness and resonance. And maybe through the sacred elements like water, fire, air, Gaia, we'll each find our own ceremony and burn our fires and our intentions at the same time. That is my hope, so that we can come back to understanding that we are all connected.
Mm. Thank you, Wildly.
Follow shamanism, animism. It will keep you grounded in the truth.
Maybe I'll just say one thing apropos of that. Because there's a lot of discussion these days about cultural appropriation and should, white Western people even be doing shamanism. So I like to take it back to first principles. Mm-hmm. The first principle of shamanism, and really in the worldview of every indigenous culture that I know about, is simply that everything is alive. And the recognition of that truth lives inside of us, even if we are many generations removed from indigeneity. It's always there. So, find the part of yourself that knows that that's true, and you will know what the next step is on the path of recovery.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you, Charles. I'm going to improvise and see, Naharka, if we can do this. If we can spotlight and have like a mini council for about 7 minutes. And if you can spotlight the first 4 people after Wildly, the mini council. Let's go with John. Yeah. What's in your heart? What image, what story? And again, just keeping it to 40 seconds, just getting right to the marrow.
Well, so grateful to be here with all of you in this way. Lots of paradox, right? So frustration and hopelessness with the scale of things and the amount of ignorance, including ignorance in all the most well-meaning people. And for example, I find electric cars to be a lie. We need less roads, not different cars, right? And then also it's like, okay, well, I can look outward and see what's wrong, but then I'm realizing I'm feeling frustration that I'm not doing things that could be better, that are pretty obvious and pretty easy to change, and I don't do them. And also for keeping small and falling into the helplessness, right? Oh my God, it's so big, and not doing what I can do as an integral coach and a Zen meditation instructor to really help people move through this. And with that, being here today with all of you is providing me with fuel to take some more steps and keep going forward, despite all the tragedy, and in celebration of all the beauty. And thank you for this time.
And as you all know, silence is part of any proper counsel. So there'll be some silence in between. And it's not just watching this, whether it's the recording or being here live. It's following the perfume of your own truth, your own grief. Let yourself feel. So,
Bob, you can go ahead next.
Great.
Oh, it's for me? Yeah, I wanted to follow up on John because I'm very similar thinking, it seems. Oh gosh, I'm a lifelong environmentalist, and my parents were as well, and that's all my history. What's happened to me is 2 years ago, I'm in California, and my house burned down in a forest fire. And it just really has thrown me, well, you can imagine. And so I'm recreating who I am and what I value. I've got a lot of money. I don't have a house, but I had insurance. So I'm a white Westerner, and I'm feeling so taken care of through this crisis that I feel guilty that I have all of these assets and things, and I'm wanting to simplify my life, simplify my lifestyle. And I can do it for myself, but I'm also wanting to encourage others to simplify their lives. And so this is my current situation. I guess I'm feeling guilt at my own superiority, as it were.
Warmly received, Bob. Thank you for sharing that. Nancy, would you like to go next?
Okay. My grief, the first thing that came to my mind was just the refugees, the most recent refugees, the pregnant women who were carried out of the hospital. I saw in the news that one woman was told that her baby, she did give birth to a baby, but that it was definitely going to die. And she said, then I'll die too. And they tried to revive her and couldn't. And that brought up for me the thought I've been having, like as I'm part of an elders group and being in my mid 70s and thinking about when does this generation leave the planet? I had a kind of a wild idea about being more intentional about that. Part of me wants to stay and part of me wants to make room. And it's just my personal dilemma these days. Oh, sorry about that. I'll mute myself.
Wow, that's just very intense to hear. Thank you for sharing that you're feeling, Nancy. Your compassion for the suffering that you see. Kara, would you like to share?
Yes, thank you. So nice to have a space for everyone to just share grief. I think for me, my life has seemed to have started with this deep heartbreak and grief with environmental trauma and trauma of humanity as a baseline. And I think that is the case to the awakening of aliveness and the duality of how those things interact with themselves and how close love is to grief and grief is to love energetically. And there's so much beauty for me in the mechanism of the integrated intelligence system that lies within us and within the mycelium network and the planet and in the ether. And it's just the coin flip of that tremendous heartbreak of, inequality justice, and what that does to the human heart and the heart everywhere, and that interconnected nature, and that internal landscaping as being part of the external landscaping is really an awe-inspiring, like nature is in its perfect natural form. It's this awe-inspiring way to continue to show up in that space and continue to feel and to grieve and to love and again and repeat in its sacred geometry. So beautiful space. Thank you.
Thank you for your share. I want to invite us all to do a little writing, just a minute's worth. I'm going to ask Niharika to open up the chat. This is optional, of course, but we didn't have the small group, and it might be helpful to just in a sentence, that image, that species, that feeling, whether it's hope or grief or anger, to express it and have it be witnessed. What's that? Okay, so just take a moment. If this were a 5-hour-long council, and all 500 plus of us had a chance to speak, what would you want to be witnessed in? Charles said, let it be visceral as possible. And if and when you're ready, you can go to the chat. The chat is on the bottom of your screen. It's a little bubble. And share, and we'll also be reading, receiving what you wrote. So I'm going to be quiet for a minute. So take another 30 seconds. You won't be able to read them all. Being a completist isn't necessary. And I've asked Charles if he would read a few of them out loud, just to give voice to a couple of them. Perhaps he'll say something after each one, or maybe just read them as they are.
I'm now trying to find they're going by so fast. I saw some ones I really did want to read.
Yeah.
If you scroll, it does stop this process.
Yes, I'm looking. Do you want me to do that now, Jonathan?
Yeah. Allow people to keep writing, but a few out loud. They're heartbreaking. Thank you, everybody who's participating in the chat share.
And there's one that really hit me, but I can't find it. But it was about the tractor coming and crushing all of the spring flowers to prepare the soil for fertilizer. And then there's some of them are just like this pain. Like one, I feel that humans are a scourge on the earth, like a biblical plague of locusts. The horror of it overwhelms me. Empty ocean. The image of the bird with outstretched wings, dripping with black oil, never to fly again. Disgust at the trash and garbage left continuously by the Hudson River. The new silence of the skies. The black holes we're digging and where everything we love disappears. My son said to me, like, all the trash in the streets makes him feel like home. Remember when your windscreen used to get splattered with insects when you drove in summer? I miss the meadow where my soul could just find beauty and comfort and inspiration. It is now going to be concrete. No one will ever know the sights I have seen in the 1940s of the air being black with ducks. There used to be crawdads in the creek. Maybe I'll add one of my own. What came to me in our meditation is the place I used to roam as a child. If I close my eyes, I can still see the wild black raspberries, the pines at the end of this long path. Like every detail of it is engraved into my mind, and that place is gone. It's totally erased. It's a housing development. And not only that, the other grief, it's like what Francis Weller says about the grief for things that never even happened. Like it never happened that I took my sons to that place and told them the stories of my childhood and anchored them into a multi-generational place. Like they don't even know what place is, really. And I know, like on the vast scale of the human drama, this is almost nothing. One time, I told that story of the place of my youth that was obliterated. And a woman said, "Charles, stop complaining. That's happened to everybody." And I was like, yes, that's my point. It's happened to everybody. And we take that as normal. And then we gaslight ourselves for even feeling so like for feeling sad, like this underlying sadness, you know? We have to recognize that those things are important, because if we recognize that those are important, then we'll start seeing the importance of everything else on earth too. It's all the same continuum. And we'll recognize what's important for other people, not just ourselves. That's the gateway back to healing. And when we step into that, our, contrary to the fear that we get mired in grief and apathetic and paralyzed, it's not. It's the opposite. Our power as change agents is magnified because we are in connection with what's real.
That is the story that we all share. Growing up, the last street in Willowdale, the edge of Toronto, and I could still leave the street and it was scrub land, but it was my place to just roam. And I loved going there. To me, it was the rainforest. It was amazing. Mm-hmm. But, I don't know, by 6 or 7, the bulldozers came and more streets, and it was gone. Yeah. And I didn't have the vocabulary or but as you speak it now, the older version of me just feels the pain of that, and that I couldn't, even if I wanted to, bring my 13-year-old son to show him the ravines that I used to play in and imagine in. Thank you, Charles. Well, Again, thank you to everybody who was vulnerable and truthful in sharing, both out loud and in the chat. I feel less alone, and I imagine that's the case for others as well. At least I hope it is. And so I want to sort of build a segue here, and say that this element of the council is complete for today, not forever, and that this is something that you can and may in fact want to do, is gather with others and share what's in your heart. Let yourself be seen and held and loved and supported. Don't try to just bulldoze through it. So as we move into the next stage of the council, if you wish, you might want to join me and take a little stretch. You have a body. You are not just a screen Zoom dweller, believe it or not. So I personally like to just move a little. You can join me or not. It's totally up to you. There's a torso, there are legs under this Zoom square. Rub them, give them a little touch and attention, because I don't get to do much. And appreciation. So this next last 45 minutes, the question I want to have us all go into and have you lead us or co-lead us, Charles, is what do we do with this one wild, precious life, as the poet Mary Oliver put it, right? My favorite quote on the subject of purpose discovery is Frederick Buechner, the theologian. How do we find that place, that crossroads between what brings us fully alive, what brings us our joy and gladness, and where the world's hunger meets? The quote is, find the place where your deep gladness and the world's hunger meets. So let's sort of just begin an induction with that. Maybe I'll say another word or two, but please come in. We'll sort of co-create it together as the mystery sees fit. The world is huge. It really can't take care of a neighborhood in China very effectively or efficiently. So the question is, what is yours? Where does love lead you? To meet this crisis. The spiritual language I sometimes use, and Charles, you can put it in your own way, as I like to use Carl Jung's term, the unique myth. There's Jonathan, the personality and ego, and he does his thing, but there's something beneath that, if you will, that animates this love passion in me. That's not just, an ego. Bill Plotkin called it the mythopoetic identity. So you don't even have to know what it is, but you can allow its presence to inform you and to embody you. So going deeper than what you think you know about yourself, and allowing the wild heart, the unique myth, your soul identity, to point to you, your place. It could be garden work, or joining a traditional environmental activist group. Who knows? I don't know. And the last thing I'll say is just, it's listening and receiving. I'm not inviting you to think about the myriad choices you have for activism. Just be an available, empty space in which that which I call soul can be heard, felt, seen. And it may not come in words, it could come as a bodily sensation, as an image, as an insight, as a symbol, or it may come as an animal or a habitat. So just take your time, and Charles may add or to these instructions. Just taking another minute. I personally like the word prayer, but you can change that, swap it out to your own depths. Imagine that you exist inside of soul, inside of the great mystery, not the other way around. How does the mystery want to move in you? And if you don't get an immediate answer, be gentle on yourself. It may come in a dream this evening, or you may open a magazine or something, and an image just takes you by the scruff of your collar. It's not on demand. It can happen instantaneously, but you also, patience sometimes with soul, I have found, is really important. So before I ask for a few people to share, Charles, is there anything you want to add or even subtract from that particular way of making the, yeah.
Well, I didn't, interrupt you. I thought that, I saw what you were invoking and it was of whole cloth. So I didn't want to add or subtract anything from it. But I am here and wanting very much to be useful. So, and maybe that's everybody, put me to use. What is that use? The first, do you mind if I say a couple things now? Okay. For me, the first step in discovering what my use is first to know that I have one, to touch the part of myself that knows that I have one. Because there can be an awful lot of ideologies, paradigms, economics, social, patriarchal patterns, so many things that say that you are not useful, or even, we're a scourge on the planet. The world would be better off without us, better off without me. I'm sure many of you have visited that territory and are familiar with what I'm talking about. And without discounting those feelings, which are really coming from somewhere else, channeled through a story and an experience into an idea, but without discounting those, alongside them always, there is a secret truth that you are here for something magnificent, something extraordinary. May not be big and grand. Other people might not ever even see it, but it's something that only you can do, because only you are in that confluence of circumstances at that moment. Teenagers especially recognize this feeling. I'm here for something magnificent. And the ego can take take hold of it and inflate it to some grand thing, but nonetheless, it's true. And the more that you hold that truth, and even just right now, just know it, that it is true, then what that step is, what is yours to do, when it comes knocking at the door, you will open the door and welcome it in. And that's why I always hesitate when people say, okay, so action time, Charles, what's the action that everybody should be taking? I'm like, no, there's no action that everybody should be taking. In fact, it's not always time to take an action. Sometimes it's time to be still and be silent until you know what action to take. But I can't universalize that process or that action. That would be rather patronizing of me, wouldn't it? To think that I know what you should do. I can tell you what's important. I can tell you the science that I know about the world. I can share my experience of the world, and that will inform your process. But really what I want to say here is that you know what to do. You know what to do. It just may not look like something that your mind says is going to be part of the solution. So another thing in stepping into this power, to know what to do, is a trust really that comes down again to the world is alive, but more than alive, the world is intelligent, the world is conscious, and that some inconceivable intelligence deploys each one of us with our full complement of gifts to just the right moment in space and time where those gifts are needed. And again, it may not look big. It may be some very intimate, personal thing. It could be a garden. It could be to hold the hand of a dying person. And who can calculate the power of these acts on a 500-year time scale, on a 5,000-year time scale? Maybe the most important thing you ever did was some small moment with a child that bears fruit decades later, generations later. We don't know how this world works. And this is maybe what Jonathan is suggesting, to experience ourselves inside of soul, inside of this unfathomable mystery. And that, yeah, it sounds like philosophy and metaphysics and stuff, but it's so practical, because immersed in that experience of swimming in soul, surrounded by soul, we become attuned to that which is ours to do. Thank you. The despair is irrational. It dresses up in rationality, in all kinds of reasons why it's not possible. But it buys into the same story that is destroying this planet right now, that is eradicating life right now, the story of separation. In that story, you are powerless. Your ability to change the world is only as great as the force that you can exert on the world. Because the story of separation doesn't recognize that inner and outer mirror each other, that self and other contain each other, that humans and nature are a part of each other, that a change on one cell of your body corresponds to changes all over the world. Some of the shares earlier were to this effect, it's happening in my body. Ecocide is happening in my body. They mirror each other. The depletion of resources, how many people are depleted? the autoimmune epidemic mirroring us turning against the part of ourselves that we call nature. It is so that means that the healing on any level is part of the healing on every level. Service to life in any form is service to life in every form. And when we know that, then we will no longer be shy about doing that part, whether it looks big or looks small. That's the revolution. And when we know that, our systems will change, because not by magic, but we'll change them. We'll say, no, no more of this. This, yes. And maybe to invite now some people to come into the spotlight. And, you know, because we have so many people here and so few opportunities to be at the center of our collective attention, maybe tap into the part of you that knows that whatever you are going to say is going to be on behalf of many. And if you feel the stirring of being like an avatar for our collective and speaking something into the council, then please raise your hand, and I will respond also as an avatar of, I'm not going to name it, but let's try that. If Jonathan, if that's a good experiment.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Naharika, the first 5 or 6 people, I see Mark, Claire, Jen, Benjamin, and Victoria. Just let me know when we're all, my Zoom thing isn't working so perfect, so I'm always just seeing myself and Charles for reasons I don't know. So just let me know when those people and myself and Charles are highlighted, and I'll ask people to share.
Let's go one at a time for now. I'm going to start with.
Should we start with Mark? Mark, please share.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So when you do gardening and permaculture, you see that the...
How about now, Mark?
How's that?
Yes.
Okay. When you do gardening or permaculture, you realize that's the real nature, and there's so much abundance. Just my dill plants alone could probably cover the entire town in this small little area. And I feel like a lot of our issues are around money, and money is not a real thing. It's just a made up thing that humans have put together. It's not a natural thing. And I know Charles has talked about this with sacred economics and things like that. And all we have to do is decide to change our view of that. For me, I'm in the cryptocurrency space where it takes governance and money together. And we're doing collective solutions of cooperating and moving this to more local, bring down to local levels, but also global levels of solutions. And just that's what I feel like. If we can change the money systems, we can change a lot of things. So that's where I come from.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just say that money is one aspect of our collective story. I call it the story of value. And as the deeper consciousness changes, then that story will change too. So I'm not going to say any more about it because that could go off onto a rabbit hole, but thank you for sharing that. And shall we move to Claire?
Hi. I would like to share a principle that has been shared with me recently by a woman named Leah Lamb, who is devoted to sacred storytelling. And I think this principle very much applies to this gathering. It's very simple. People are not moved by data. People are moved by stories. Yep. And when we hear each other's stories and we hear each other's feelings about what's going on in the world, we are moved much more than just reading the latest IPCC report. And when we hear stories of Ukrainian refugees, we are moved in ways that are different from just reading a story in a newspaper. I've had experiences with refugees from many parts of the world for decades. And it disturbs me that those stories have not been featured and shared with people in general, the way that the stories of Ukrainian refugees are being shared now. Mm-hmm. But it's because of hundreds of stories of torture and trauma and loss that have been shared with me that I feel moved. And to the degree that we can amplify this kind of gathering and share our feelings and share our experiences and share our stories, I think the principle of just sharing more data isn't going to take us where we need to go. That's it.
Thank you, Claire. I'll just say that we are really awakening everybody, for good purposes and bad, awakening to the power of story as the primary creation technology of human beings. And it can be wielded, as you're saying, like you can make propaganda out of storytelling. And but yeah, let's be aware of that power and hold it sacred. Jen.
Hello. I work with a lot of grief circles, and we're learning, of course, that shame dies when stories are told in safe places. And there's so much shame, so much shame, like my shame, my parents' shame, my parents' parents' shame, societal shame, just shame just in there. And I learning that, as we can breathe space into that shame and bring it up to the surface and share it in its form, and kind of release it into the earth, into the underworld, there's this opening that happens in all of us, this void. And we get really scared to work with that void, to create curiosity and explore that void. And what I find comes through a lot of times is not so much fear and hate and rage, but beyond that is this tremendously huge, overbearing, overwhelming love that our planet has for us. That in my moments of just really being angry and like, why can't you, spirit, just get rid of Vanguard and BlackRock, just get rid of those guys, we'll have a chance. And there's this knowing that, but I love them too. And I need you and all of my children to learn how to love each other. And it's huge. It's a huge, overwhelming love. It's one thing to love the planet, but then when we get a sense of that love coming through, of how much she loves us all of us, every single organism, every single beautiful manifestation, expression of diversity and form, it's overwhelming. And in some ways, for me, it's been causing even more grief, kind of throwing me into this, stay still, don't take any action, be patient, sit with this, and let your heart just keep breaking over and over. And it's a lot to hold for any of us. And I worry because I don't know what to do with it, but I know all I can do is surrender and trust. And I just feel like that's really coming through strong to share with us collectively, that we are so, so, so loved. And it's in some ways it's more terrifying to cultivate and explore that love than it is even to cultivate and explore the rage and the fear and the shame. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen. So important. Thank you so much for that. Benjamin, would you like to bring in one more thing here?
I'm shaking. I don't have experience speaking to large groups. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
And I guess I'm also really scared about what I have to say, or if I can say it. I guess I've thought well, there was a something about food, a little workshop that Charles provided online about, I remember, eat anything you want to eat, like, and some other writing you did, Charles, where you talked about okay, well, I just want to express gratitude. And I'm worried that this will sound facetious, and maybe it is. This is what comes to me. Like somebody just mentioned Vanguard. I just want to experiment with expressing my huge amount of gratitude for big business in this world, the oil companies, Vanguard, for providing cheap gas. Like, you know, we know where we can get it for less, and we go there, and it's provided to us, or a plastic spatula that came from China for 99 cents to flip my pancakes. Like, they have done so much, like enslaved young children, bombed innocent people, taken on all that karma, for me, to allow me this really comfortable life. So I really want to experiment with sending them love and gratitude, I guess, really. And where it brings me, you're talking about spirituality and environmental activism. And there was something in the little introductory video about how we have to be consistent, like, or it doesn't work. Also, I think, Charles, in your essay about the war in Chechnya, or in Ukraine, the same idea that you have to, anyway, I will wrap it up and say that in the time of the Buddha, his students were being enlightened very rapidly. lots of enlightened people. They were reaching enlightenment. And we wonder, well, was it that he was so special, such a great teacher? There are many teachers who are very clear and precise about the instructions. The difference I see is in the time of the Buddha, his followers owned nothing. And that's the same with the followers of Jesus. And so I wonder, or I hold this question, or I guess you're asking about action. My heart is moved to say, what if we all just, and again, okay, from separateness to interbeing, we're all living in separateness is what's coming to me. And we talk about having one foot in each story. And to me, I question, is that really the old story, this idea of one foot in each? So what would be the real leap? What would be an action that would show clearly that I was in the story of interbeing? You would all be as precious to me as myself, as my daughters, as my mother. So you can all, 1748 Electric Avenue, Bellingham, Washington. This is your house. This is your money. We all pull our resources as if we just crashed on a desert island. Nobody's richer, nobody's poor. How do we make this work? And yeah, obviously I'm babbling at this point. Thank you.
No, it's good, Benjamin. Thank you. I think we can all recognize the future that you're speaking from, and recognize that there is a path from here to that future of universal brotherhood, sisterhood, siblinghood. And we can hear it in your voice, your sincerity. So, and also I just love the, little monkey wrench you threw in about gratitude towards the oil companies and, BlackRock and so forth. And this cheap spatula, and it kind of brings to me like this kind of forgiveness, like you put somebody in the situation of a modern American consumer with their entire childhood, their entire environment, and then you give them a choice of cheap gas or expensive gas or spatula from China or no spatula in their busy lives where they can't make a spatula out of wood because they don't have the skills, because they don't have the time, because they don't have the cultural environment. Of course, they're going to do exactly what they've been doing. And that kind of forgiveness that does not condemn and judge each other and ourselves, but instead holds the knowledge of our readiness to change and feels the truth of that readiness. That is actually way more empowering than fighting the old battle against evil. So thank you for bringing that in. And Jonathan, I'll just turn it back over to you now. I know we're winding down here.
Yeah. Thank you, Charles. I would like to actually end with two questions for you. One around interbeing, and then one about discovering one's calling. I'm going to switch to a slide. We had a little meeting, before this event. And after the event, one of our staff, Catherine, sent me an email, and I really liked it. So I'm going to share it. And the question will come off of that. So Catherine said that her main hope for the climate change gathering is that together we can rediscover ourselves as nature. I can feel the desire in myself to fall back into union with nature, to unlearn the separation and alienation from it that I see in society and we've all absorbed for years. Only then do I feel that my actions on behalf of the earth and her creatures have any hope of being wise, grounded, and true. Only then do I feel that I am addressing the root of climate change and ecological disaster, which lives in my heart and in the heart of our culture. Together, I hope we can reopen our hearts to nature, and through doing so, find that we do belong here and that we have a sacred seat around the fire of life, and so does everything else. Captain, that was eloquently put. So if I were to sum up that question for you, Charles, a lot of people, yeah, intellectually we get it, and we even have, some good moments, but it's a how question, which of course is very difficult and onerous sometimes. How do we, let me turn this off. How do we make that transition for those of us who haven't necessarily gone too far to awaken the embodied experience of being an organ of the living earth?
Yeah, so as you hinted, it's not actually a how question, because you already know how, but it is, you take an animal and you put it in a cage, you cut it off from its fellows, you subject it to all kinds of loud noises and other torments, and it is going to behave as an animal behaves in that cage. The same thing has happened to us. We are still animal, we are still nature, we are still life. That it already is true. It is already true. It's already there. There's nothing to realize. There's nothing to return to. We are already life. And paradoxically, that knowledge, when you really take it in, it leads to a forgiveness and an acceptance that is transformative. And so it's even that is not a how, it is actually already happening. It is already happening. The awakening is already happening. The awakening to our being as nature, as life. It is happening. It's happening right now. It's not something that is instructed. It's something that is invoked. It's happening right now. And then the mind is like, okay, so what do I have to do? Give me something to do. Make it hard. Nope. It's happening right now.
Beautiful. Well, my penultimate question is again, it's a little how-ish, but that's all right. You can take it as you see fit. So all of these things are happening on the planet. And so there's this question, so I'm in love with life. I'm in love with the planet. How do I know? How do I respond? Maybe I'll share, my answer after yours, taking a soul walk, and I can explain that. But where does that question land for you? And people are like, okay, I've got all this love and grief and love. How can I allow it to move? My head just gets in the way and I don't know what to do.
Yeah, trust yourself as life. Trust that what feels good and what makes you feel alive is the thing to do. And then get serious about that. Someone might say, well, what feels really good would be to get drunk tonight. What I really want to do is, steal from somebody. I mean, is that really what you want to do? And is that really what's going to feel good? When you really trust life within you, is that what you do? So get serious about trusting yourself as life.
Yeah.
And look at what gives you the most joy ever. How about more of that? Let's stop going to war against nature, okay? Including inner nature. Yeah.
Amen. Yeah, I would just riff on that, and feel free to riff back. Is get out of your four walls and right angles and take a walk in wild nature with a prayer or a request right? To be occupied, which you already are, but to let that come to the foreground of awareness. And then to ask the question, what do I do with this one wild, precious life, as the poet Mary Oliver put it? And then to listen with alternate organs of perception. Listen with the skin, which is the biggest organ, right? Listen with your heart. Breathe in and out of your heart. Listen with your belly, your hara. Listen as if wild nature and you are coextensive. And fifth, and finally, listen as wild imagination itself. Don't suppose that wild imagination is just a faculty of your mind. You exist in the wild imagination of something that I couldn't even name. And then you may receive an answer. And it may just be that very thing that Charles just said, something that brings you wildly alive and joyful. That simultaneously meets the hunger of the world. The example I often give, I love going to listen to live jazz at the San Francisco Jazz Center, and I will continue to do so for as long as I'm able. Brings me alive. Great. Pleasure, music, fantastic. But there's something even deeper than that. I didn't actually come to Earth just to listen to music. There's some act of love and service. So that's that place, that Frederick Buechner quote, the place that brings you deep gladness and that meets a great need in the world. Anything you want to say to feel complete-ish?
No, that I'm not going to add to that.
Okay. All right. Well, a couple of closing items. We are going to send this recording out to all of you. If it is your joy to do so, please share it. I'll also be inviting people who are interested in something called Introduction to Purpose Discovery. And you can just click on it if you want to, or if you're watching the recording, you can click and discover what that is about. And then finally, a request. We offered this, free of charge registration, but we are asking for donation so we can pay our staff and so forth. So I'll just ask Charles to say a few words. He's actually written about this different alternate way of exchange or sharing or gifting. And I'd like him to share if he's willing.
Yeah, the old model is, I've got this thing and I won't give it to you unless you pay me, which is oppositional, it's separation. And the new model is here. And I trust your gratitude if you feel so moved to give it, reciprocally, then I welcome that. But I'm not going to build paywalls and barriers because, I want to give it out. And especially with digital products, where honestly, it doesn't cost any extra to give it to 5,000 people as it does to 500 or to 2. So I have a lot to say about business in the gift and this whole turnaround away from an oppositional default. This is deep in classic economic theory. Everyone's trying to get the best for themselves, the most for themselves. No, it isn't. That's not true, actually. And it's become true in this society, but we can begin to undo that. And traditional cultures and wisdom lineages and so forth have a model for that, actually. So I'm very happy to participate in that.
Thank you. Yeah, I've never offered it quite like in this way before. So it's I appreciate your leading the way and taking a kind of trust fall and seeing how that works out. So anyway, we'll send you a link. There's also a link below if you're listening to the recording, and your donations would support us to get this recording out and to continue this series. We've done one of these or a couple of these with Joanna Macy, with Terry Patton, and we'd like to continue. So your support is appreciated. All right. Any last thing you want to say? And then we'll call it a day.
No, just thank you, everybody, for contributing your attention and your heart and your love to this big endeavor that we're all part of. Yes.
Thank you, Charles. I imagine you get many, many more invitations than you can say yes to. And for whatever reason, you said yes to this one. And I'm very glad to have shared counsel with you in this way.
Thank you.
Much gratitude to you. All right. If you'd like to, you can unmute. It's a cacophony when people do this, but what the heck? You can unmute and just say, bye, love, earth. There you go.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you. Thanks so good.